All. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to the 7 days faculty development program through virtual mode on research methodology for social science. Since 2 days, we have been engaged on an enriching journey of learning and professional growth. Day 3 session will flourish you all with the fundamentals of conceptual framework, which would be presented by our resource person, Dr. S. Shivashakti. She is an accomplished academic professional with a strong foundation in commerce and corporate secretaryship. With a PhD in commerce, specializing in human resource management, she has also contributed extensively to research and education. She brings over a decade of experience in teaching and scholarly activities. Dr. Shivashakti ma'am, she has also published several papers in renowned journals, presented research papers at national and international conferences, and also has actively participated in workshops. She brings a strong communication, coordination, and leadership skills to her roles, contributing effectively to academic and administrative tasks. Thus, I now hand over the session to Dr. Shivashakti ma'am.
Thank you, Anita ma'am, for introducing me in this 7 days workshop, 7 days faculty development program. Good afternoon to one and all. I am Shivashakti. Am I audible to all?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. So today we are going to discuss about the fundamentals of conceptual framework. It's nothing but So before getting into the concepts, I would like to have a short recap about the past 2 days. So the day one, Divya ma'am has given a brief explanation about what is research and why the research and what importance of research and its process, methodology, types, and sampling. These are the things we have you have come across deeply by good understanding. And the day two, Kriba Sankar sir have given in-depth knowledge about the review of literature. So continuous to that, I would like to start with fundamentals conceptual framework of research. So today we are going to discuss about the introduction part and the importance of the conceptual terms and its components and development process, research problems, and research design. So now let us get into what is a conceptual framework. So it is a structured plan. Whatever we think, we have some visual expression in our mind that what is going to be happen and how it has to be done. So in the same way, when we are getting into the research, we must have a lot of questions. Without getting a questions in our mind, couldn't go search for answers. So it is a main thing where we have to, before getting into the research, we must create our own questions to get into the research so that we can gather the results in a right way. So it defines a key variables and illustrate the relationship between them. So variables is nothing but the terms we get into the research, we call it as variables. And how it affect the research, it all talks about in this conceptual framework. For example, let us take the social media usage. By using the social media usage, how our study habits develops. So when the study habit develops, how it reflect on the academic performance. So this is a research process. So we couldn't say that research process identifying a topic or moving along with the practice and how it reflects on the other side, that we couldn't say that this is the research. Research is nothing but we must first identify the problem. So anything, whatever we get into the research, it reflects to the impact on the society. It must give true facts or benefits to the society. So that is the main aim of the research. So the next one is the purpose of conceptual framework. So we must have some goal to reach the research output. So we must identify the variables So variables here helps identify the relationship between the variables. It provides a guide for data collection and analysis and clarifies theoretical underpinning of your research. For example, if you study about the employee motivation, so employee motivation, what variables or what the concepts or what the things motivate the employee. So we must have the framework. What are the factors that connected to the employee motivation? For example, like you take a work environment may boost the employee's motivation or their rewards and the job satisfaction to overall the productivity. So these are the certain factors which motivate the employee. And there are certain components for the conceptual framework we would like to discuss is the variables and how the variables is related to one another and it's a theoretical background. So for conceptual framework, we must have some the basic, there are certain basic steps to get into the conceptual framework is to identify the research problem. For example, kindly excuse. Sorry for the inconvenience. So here I would like to explain the steps for the research. That is, first we have to identify the research problem. For example, why do the students procrastinate? If you give any work to the students may get postponed their work. Let us do on the next day. If you are giving an assignment, we'll be asking the students to submit on the next day. So the students won't do in the right time at the to complete the work. So they postpone the work till the next day. So that we call it as procrastination. So why this happens among the students? So this is the problem we are identifying. So for any research work, first we have to identify the problem. Next, here the variable is the procrastinate. So we identify in this research is a procrastinate. So it is a main variable for our research. So related to this variable, we have to go for the review of relevant literature and what this procrastination among the students, how the research have perceived in their perception. So we must look into the review of literature, what the other researchers have identified among the students' procrastination and what has the output has given. So from that, we have to identify the gap. From the research problem, after gathering the review of literature, we must identify the gap. What the researchers have done, the past researchers have done in this variable, and what next step, the gap, what they have left and what we have to do. It's a research gap. So that gap we have to identify. After identifying the gap, research gap, we have to get into the next step. That is define the variables. What are the variables that impact the procrastination? So they for the other factors, maybe they are laziness or the distractions. So these are the certain some factors which impact the procrastination. So likewise, we have to identify the which is independent and which is the dependent variable. So we have to identify the variables. After identifying or defining the variables, we have to establish the relationships, how the variable interrelated to each other. After identifying this variable interdependence, we have to frame a hypothesis. Hope you might have come across the meaning of hypothesis. That hypothesis is nothing but it has only two types, that is null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. If we accept the null hypothesis, alternative hypothesis will get rejected. So even in certain movies, you might have come across the meaning of the hypothesis. Even in the past years, the 2.0 Rajini film also you have come across some questions will be asked to the robot and it will say it is an hypothetical situation. It means if you are taking any one situation, the other thing has to be left. So this is the hypothetical situation. Likewise, in the hypothesis, framing a hypothesis based on the variables, once we accept null hypothesis, other hypotheses get rejected. If the alternative hypothesis get accepted, null hypothesis get rejected. So based on the hypothesis, we have to identify the tools, what tools has to be implemented, statistical tools to get into the result. And we have to visualize the framework. So here is a problem, here is the related reviews and what are the variables related to the procrastination, how it is interrelated to each other, how the hypothesis, basically by framing the hypothesis, we don't, all the researchers basically frame the hypothesis as a null hypothesis. Why? What is the need of framing hypothesis based on the null hypothesis? Because anything we are getting into research means we don't have any idea towards it. So we frame the hypothesis that there is no relationship, there is no difference. So we'll be framing the hypothesis in such a way. So by framing like this, we come to know whether there is a relationship or not. There is no relationship. So likewise, we have to visualize our framework by using diagrams. What is our research problem and what the gap we have identified and what are the variables, main variable, and how the other factors reflect to the main variable and how it is related, interrelated. Everything we have to put in our mind in the framework. That is visualized diagram into us. Or we can have them stick notes also. So this is the conceptual frameworks of the research. We'll move to the next one. So examples of conceptual framework. So let us see the example one. Research, if the research topic is effect of diet on health and how its process will be, what is the balanced diet, what are the nutrient intake has to be taken. By taking these nutrient intakes, what the improved health outcomes. So this is the research process. You see, if you see the example two, employee retention have been employee retention, how it comes based on the job satisfaction. If the employee are satisfied with their job, they'll be sticking to their job, how they are committed to the job, and how it is, we'll see their outcomes. Next, the importance of research is the basically 3 points. It offers a clarity and focus, aligns with the research objectives, and provides a roadmap for the methodology analysis. Okay, now let's see the offers clarity and focus. It helps identify the specific issue of questions. So on the previous slide itself, I have said before getting into the research, we must have a lot of questions on our mind. Without a questions, we couldn't go for any result. So we must avoid some unnecessary detours by narrowing the scope of the study. And it facilitates a clear understanding of what the research aims to achieve. So before getting to research, we must have the clarity on these points. So it is a basic thing, what must be, how we have to get clarity and focus to the research. And next, aligns with the research objectives. So anything what we do, we must have some objectives. Objective is nothing but how the goal has to be achieved by certain steps. So what we are going to identify, that we fix as an objectives. That ensures that all research activities contribute directly to the stated goals. So it guides the development of hypotheses, methodologies, and expected outcomes. Next, the third step is provides a roadmap for the methodology and analysis. So by identifying the research problem, we get into the review of literature. After getting to the review of literature, we'll find the research gap. After finding the research gap, we find the related variables and how these variables are interrelated. And we frame the hypothesis. After framing the hypothesis, based on the hypothesis, we'll acquire the statistical tools From the by using the statistical tools, we get the output. So this is the methodology we have to follow for the research. So first we must know what is research problem. So research problem is nothing but addressing a gap in knowledge. So whatever the questions we have in our mind, we don't get all the answers for these questions. Somewhat there will be some unknown answer for our questions. So that is a gap. So no person is full-fledged or 100% knowledgeable, and no person is or poor or unethical or unknowledged person. We couldn't say any person like that. So everyone have some certain shortage. So that we call it as a gap. So how this gap has to be identified? That is, we call it as a research problem. So it is a challenge or a contradiction in a particular field. By choosing the field, also it gives them some contradiction. And we have to identify and define the aim. By identifying the problem, from the problem, what you are going to give the output and which should favors to the society. And also help identify the key concept and terms and overarching questions and variable associated with the study. Hope I think you might have get the meaning of research problem. So research problem, basically it have its own nature and its characteristics, characteristics, nature, it features, everything talks about the same thing. And really it gives what it is, actually what it is. So it isn't reflecting on issue or the required knowledge in a particular field prior to the conducting a study. So anything before conducting any study, we have to need prior knowledge about the area. And ensuring the topic aim to examine has to sufficient amount of the relevant data. So whatever the topic we are choosing, we must gather related data to it. And relaying to the reputable evidence and data discarding information that you can't verify. And remaining practicable, manageable, communicative with researchers involved in data collection and analysis, and adhering strictly to the budget and timeline. So whatever we have identified any problem. If it is, we feel that it is that we could do it, and we might bring a result to the research problem. So it happens. So along with this, we have to see our own budget and the time duration, how it can be done at the within the duration period. Here there is a types of research problem, that is theoretical research problem, applied research problem, and action research problem. We'll look into each one by one. First, we'll see the theoretical research problems. So now we'll look into the theoretical research problem. So theoretical research problem is nothing but based on the concept we gather to the problem. So gathering information and knowledge toward the problem. Next, we must find the information gaps. So a lot of data will be gathering from the newspaper or journals or media. Through this, we'll gather some more information. From these information, we have to identify what has been left and yet to be find a solution for it. We call it as a research gap. So we have to address the contradiction between two or more perspectives. So researchers have a different perspective. Perspective is nothing but how a person look into the information or look into a problem. So if I see a problem that I think that I could make a solution for it, other may think that the problem is too complicated, it has no other way to solve it. So other person might have think this is very simple, it's not at all a problem. So the perception differs from person to person. So this is how the theoretical research problem stays on. Next, we'll look into the applied research problems. So applied research problem is nothing but by gathering this information, we have to apply the information with the real problems. So it has some practical use. It includes an exploratory hypothesis and testing the accuracy and how the scientific statistical tools has to be used to bring the result into the research. This we call it as an applied research problem. So applied research problem is another way we call it as a non-systematic problems. So with the basic theoretical data, we'll identify what is the gap and how the gap can be filled with the reasonable solutions. That we call it as an applied research problems. Next, action research problems. Action research problem is nothing but taking a immediate solution to the problems. For example, past week we have come across a cyclone. So there we find a problem, how the people are met the problems in the cyclone, and there we couldn't make what are the variables and how the waves have come. We couldn't go and search or have the questions like this. So we have to take the immediate action to solve that problem. That we call it as an action research problems. It means applying right to the problem and getting the solution to the right point at the earliest possible. That we call it as an action research problems. So far we are talking about research problem, and how to identify the gap, and how to identify the variable, and what are the sources reflect the variables, and how hypothesis has to be framed. Likewise, we have come across. So how we could identify the research problem? What is a problem? Where we go and search for a problem? So any people or any person, first we have to identify the area of interest, whether it may be on marketing, it may be on HR, it may be on finance, or it may be the social issues. So we have to first have our own interest where our interest lies on. So without the basic interest, we can get and go and search for the information and identify the problem. So first thing, we have to identify the area of interest. Next, we have to get into the area of the interest and gather some knowledge, the basic knowledge and really what it is. By general perception, we might have certain interest towards it. Interest is nothing but it's a general wish. It's our own wish. But apart from the wish, what is really inside into the field, we have to get into the information. So we have to gather more information. From the information, we have to identify the problem. So after identifying the problem, we have to go for the reviews. So for example, if a person asks you, here is the sea. The sea is the ocean. For example, I'm saying, here is the ocean. I see this is a sea, and everyone could say that is a sea. What you're going to identify this? Anyone, if ask you, means as a researcher, the researcher should answer how you think. Yes, we should not say that, yes, it's a sea. Yes, often everyone sees as a sea. But how the researcher see the sea is the problem. We could see, so everyone sees that the sea is full of water and it has some species into it. But as to the researcher knows, and what is the problem inside to it. So the researcher's perception differs from the normal person. So just like this, the problem has to be identified and bring interrelationship between it. And we have to fix the variables and find the solution to it. before getting into this area of the interest? Hope I am not rushing to the concept. So let us have a 2 minutes break. Meanwhile, you may get into the attending the polls in the chat box. Yes, hope you might have attended this poll. We have posted 3 questions. So first question is, what is the primary purpose of the conceptual framework? So the answer is to define the relationship between the variables. So based on the concept, we'll identify the problem. From the problem, we'll fix the variables and we see what is the relationship between the variables. So the purpose of conceptual framework is to define relationship between variables. Okay. Second question, in a conceptual framework, what does the independent variable represent? So here the answer is the cause or the predictor of change. Okay. The third question, which of the following is not a component of the conceptual framework? We know for the conceptual framework, we need a variables and their relationships and a theoretical basis. So here, which is not is the research ethics approval. So the answer is D, research ethics approval, right? And in the chat box, someone asked, what is the difference? The chat box, someone has asked me, is research problem and research question is the same? No. So research problem is different and research question is the different. So research problem is, for example, the student is not studying well is the problem. So the student is not studying well is the problem we had identified. Why he is not studying is the research question. Okay. Hope you might have understood the difference between the research problem and research question. Okay. Thank you. Now let us continue. So we have come across before the break, we have come across these 5 points. We'll look into this 5 points in detail. That is, identify a general area of interest. So first we have to determine an area of study and consider areas that haven't been explored thoroughly. So as you determined an area of the study, consider areas that haven't been explored thoroughly or present challenges within a particular field. Assess how you might address the area of concern and whether you can develop a research program related to this issue. If your research is an action-based or applied, consider contacting those who work in a relevant field to obtain feedback about the problems to address. You can also follow up on research that others have already conducted. So you better consider certain various aspects when choosing an area of interest. That is a contradiction between two or more theoretical perspectives, situations, or natural relationship that haven't been investigated thoroughly, and process in an institution or an organization that you and your research team could improve, area of concern raised by individuals who work or experts in a particular industry. So this is how you have to identify a general area of the interest. Okay. The next, learn more about the problem. So the next step is to learn more about the area of interest. Ask yourself what you need to know about a particular topic before you begin your study. Assess who or what it might affect and how your research could address those relationships. Consider whether other research groups have already tried to solve the problem you're interested in analyzing and how your approach might differ, right? So finding the problem and how the problem you perceive and would like to give output towards. And third one, a review of context of information. So reviewing the context of your research involves defining and testing the environmental variables in your project, which may help you create a clear and focused research problem. It may also help you note which variables are present in the research and how to account for the impact that they may have on it. By reviewing the context, you may easily estimate the amount of data your research is likely to require. Okay. Next, we have to determine the relationship between variables. After identifying the variables involving in your research, you can learn how they are related to one another and how these relationships may contribute to your research problem. Consider generating as many potential perspectives and variable interactions as possible. Identifying the relationship between the variables may be useful when deciding the degree to which you can control them in your study and how they might affect a potential solution to the problem you are addressing. And finally, select and include the important variables. Clear and manageable research problem typically includes the variable that are most relevant to the study. A researcher team summarizes how they plan to consider and use these variables and how they might influence the results of the study. Selecting the most important variables, your variables can help the study audience better understand the trajectory of your research and the potential impact of the solution. Okay. So hope you might have understand these 5 points. So let us, from this picture, you can assume these as an variables. So which is a suitable variable that is required for your preparation, right? So far I am saying variable, variable, variable. What do you mean by variable? Variable is nothing but which vary from each other. So variable is an any kind of attribute or characteristics that you're trying to measure or manipulate and control in statistics and research. Study often involve the analyzing a variable which can describe a person or a place, a thing or idea. So anything it may be that we call it as a variable under the research topic. So there are certain different types of variables, that is independent variable, dependent variable, quantitative variable, qualitative variable, intervening variables, moderating variable, extraneous variable, confounding variable, control variable, composite variable. So now I have taken some different 10 types of variables over here. Now I'll give the meaning of the variables. So independent, now first we'll look into the independent variable and dependent variable and how it differs each other. So independent variable, it stands alone and it isn't changed by other variable or factor that are measured. For example, where someone lives, what they eat, or how much they exercise are not going to be changed in their age. So it gives a particular individual living style. So it is an independent variable. Dependent variable is nothing but which relies on and can be changed by other factors that are measured. For example, a grade someone gets in an example depends on factors as such and how much sleep they got and how long they studied. So this is a dependent variable based on their effectiveness, how their scores reflects. So this is dependent variable. Here dependent variable is their effectiveness is the dependent variable. Effectiveness means how far they have spent time on their sleep and how far they have spent on their study period. So this reflect their results. So this is here is a dependent variable. Okay. Now we'll see the quantitative variables and qualitative variables. Basically, we all know the quantitative variables talks about the count, which can be counted, or we could the data sets, the number, amounts, or which is easy to count. We call it as a quantitative variables. Qualitative variable is nothing but we talk about the quality of it, the quality involved in it, says the qualitative variables. For example, under the quantitative variables, what can be measured? We can measure the height, distance, numbers. Whereas measurable things, we call it as a quantitative variables. The qualitative variable is how we see thing in a or perception. That is eye color, a dog breed, or something like this. So this is a qualitative variables. Under the quantitative variables, there is a discrete and continuous. So discrete variable is nothing but any numerical variables you can really count, such as a coins in your wallet or the money in your savings account. So which is countable, we call it as a discrete quantitative variable. Continuous variable means that could never finish counting, such as a time. It brings a continuous process that we call it as a continuous quantitative variable. Under quantitative variable, we have three types: binary, nominal, and ordinal. Binary means by means we all know the by means two. So there is only two option which is a which represent its quality. For example, variables which only has a two categories such as a male or female, red or blue, or a married or unmarried. So this is a binary variable, okay, which has only two options. Nominal is variable that you can organize in more than two categories that do not follow a particular order. For example, housing types, single family home uh, and tiny home, just like this, we call it as a nominal. Ordinal variables that you can organize in more than two categories that follow a particular order. For example, level of satisfaction, satisfied, highly satisfied, not satisfied, fully not satisfied. So this is the ordinal with below to higher level. So there is an order, 1 to 5, 6 to 8. This means it has some orders from basic to higher level. So that we call it as an ordinal. So these things, binary, nominal, and ordinal, which talks about its the variable's quality. Okay. Hope you might have understood the meaning of independent variable and dependent variable and quantitative and qualitative variable. Okay. Now let us move to the next one. Intervening variables and moderating variables. So intervening variables is a theoretical variable which is used to explain the cause and connection between the other steady variables. Moderating variables that changes the relationship between the dependent and independent variable by strengthening or weakening the intervening variables effect. For clear understanding of the intervening variables, we'll look into an example that is access to health care. If wealth is an independent variable and a long lifespan is a dependent variable. So again, I'll tell you, wealth is an independent variable and a long lifespan is a dependent variable. If the person is very wealthy, he could manage his own needs and requirements. So his lifespan extends. So here lifespan is dependent variable because here lifespan based on the wealth. If he is not wealth, he couldn't have a long period of a lifetime. Okay. So here you could understand the meaning of dependent and independent variable from this example. So wealth is an independent variable and a long lifespan is a dependent variable. Okay. So a researcher might hypothesis that access to quality health care is the intervening variable that links wealth and lifespan. See here, we have seen here the wealth is an independent variable and lifespan is the dependent variable. And these two variables are connected with an intervening variable, that is healthcare. Okay. Under the moderating variables, we look into another example. Let us take the age. In a study looking at a relationship between the economic status is an independent variable, and how frequently people get physical exams from a doctor is a dependent variable. So age is a moderating variable. So that relationship might be a weaker in a younger individuals and stronger in the older individuals. Okay. I think you might have understood very clearly, or you want me to explain once again this example age? Next, we'll look into the extraneous and confounding variables. So extraneous variables and confounding variables. So extraneous variable is nothing but factors that affect the dependent variable, but which the researcher did not originally consider when designing the experiment. For example, parent support, prior knowledge of a foreign language or socioeconomic status or extraneous variables that could influence a study assessing whether the private tutoring or the online course are more effective at the improving the students' Spanish test scores. Okay, here in the example, what they are saying means a person or a student, let us take a student and how he improves in his study by his parent support or the knowledge he has a inbuilt knowledge within him or the socio-economic status. So these are the extraneous variable. So extraneous variable means okay. Okay, now look into the confounding variables. So confounding variable is extra variables that a researcher did not account for. They can distinguish another variable effect and show a false correlation. So that is a confounding variables where they don't have the interconnection between the variables. Okay, for example, in a study of whether a particular genre of the movie affects how much candy kids eat, which experiments are held at 9 a.m. to noon and 3 p.m. Okay, time could be a confounding variables. So here it's a time duration fixed to the study. As a group in the noon study might be a hungrier and therefore eat more candy because lunchtime is typically at the noon. So during the noon time, a person is getting more hungry, may take a more candy. So this is, we call it as an confounding variable. So based on the situation, how a variable acquire the things, right? So we'll move to the next control variables and composite variables. So control variable is nothing but that says about the characteristics that are constant and do not change during the study. Okay. For example, experiment about the plant development, control variables might include the amount of fertilizer and water to each plant gets. So these amounts are always the same, so they do not affect the plant's growth. So this is a control variables, which has a constant input to the research. Composite variable is nothing but the two or more variables combined to make a more complex variable. For example, health is an example of the concept variable. If a researcher uses other variables, do you want more explanation on control variables or composite variable? That's it. Do you have any queries under the variables so far we have discussed till control variables? If you have any queries, means you can raise queries. Okay. Now we'll continue with the composite variables. So composite variable, it means two or more variables to make a more complex variable. That is, under the example we have taken, the health is a composite variable. So if a researcher uses other variables such as a genetic, medical care, education, quality or environment and chosen behavior to determine overall health is an experiment. So these are the genetics, medical care, education, quality of environment and chosen behavior which reflect on the health. So this we call it as an composite variable. So what are the factors impact on a particular variable? We call it as a composite variable, right? So with better understanding, how do you control the confounding variables? So we have seen some confounding variables that affect a particular, which impact the particular variable. So how do you control the confounding variables? So here we have certain points to control the confounding variables, that is adjustment, matching, multivariate analysis, randomization, restriction, and stratification. Adjustment is nothing but uh, study parameters to account for the confounding variable and minimize its effects. So which variable affect uh, gives or more disturbance to the particular variables, that has to be minimized, that we could not that we should not show or more give importance to the variable. And we have to match the variable, how the confounding variable stick to a particular variable. And the multivariate analysis is by testing the using the same variable to the particular variable. Randomization means spread confounding variables evenly between the study groups. The restriction means if continuously it disturbs the particular variable, means that we have to remove the particular variable from the study. Stratification means create a study subgroups in which the confounding variables does not vary or vary much. It means it not giving a much effect to a particular variable, means we can consider such variable into the study. So for you might have cleared about what is research problem and the meanings of variables. So based on these things, now we have to put our mind to frame what the research has to be and how the research has to be done and how we have to perceive or look into the research area, right? That we call it as an research design. So research design is nothing but it is a plan that guides the process of conducting research, including the methods and techniques for collecting and analyzing the data. So it is a critical component of the research process, and it is essential for ensuring that the research objectives are met. So it is a basic framework of research methods and techniques chosen by the researcher to conduct a study. The design allows the researchers to sharpen the research methods suitable for the subject matter and set up the studies for success. And so shall we take another short break? Meanwhile, you take another polling session. Please participate.
Okay. Hope you might have all attended the poll. Now we'll look into the questions. So the question is, which tool is commonly used to visualize a conceptual framework? So for conceptual framework, for visualizing the concepts, we have to focus on diagrams and flowchart. So obviously the answer is diagram and the flowchart. Okay. The next question is, what is the first step in developing a conceptual framework? So first step is nothing but basically whether you're getting into the research means you have to identify the research problem. So this is the first step in developing a conceptual framework in a research, right? So the answer is identifying the research problem. Next question, which type of framework predicts outcome based on specific variables? Again, I'll read the question, which type of framework predicts outcome based on specific variables? So the answer is predictive framework, right? Okay. Now we'll continue with the concept that is research design. So research design is nothing but the framework of a research. So its features. So the features of a good research design is it is to be very flexible, appropriate, efficient, and economically suitable to the researcher. And also any design must minimize the bias and maximize the reliability of the data collected. And researcher has to be capable of obtaining the most reliable and valid data. So we have to minimize the smallest experimental error. And researcher has to be capable of measuring any odd events in any circumstances. And we have to gather more information, that is maximum information related to the concepts. So from the information, we have to derive what is most related to the topic. And it provides an opportunity for considering many different aspects of the problem. So related to the purpose of objective of the research problem. So these are the basic features for a good research design. Again, I'll tell you, for basic research design, it must be, your concept has to be very flexible. There should not be any bias, and it has to, your concept has to be most reliable and must contain the valid data. And there may be a small error. Small errors is acceptable because no person could provide 100%, 10% good in all aspects. So the errors are acceptable at the minimum level. Okay, and capable of measuring at any circumstances, and maximum information has to be gathered, and the gathered information should give an opportunity to identify the problem and put into the result, and based on these an objective has to be framed. Okay, so these are the basic features of the research design. Research design. Are you all able to hear me? Am I audible to all? Okay, now we'll get into the process of research design. So the research design process is a systematic and structured approach to conducting a research. So the process is essential to ensure that the study is a valid, a reliable, or produces a meaningful results. So under the process, there is 5 steps. That is, consider your aim and approaches, choose a type of research design, identify your population and sampling method, choose your data collection method, plan your data collection procedures, design your data analysis strategies. So this is the research design process. From the design, we must have the clear understanding of the research, that what and how the research has to be processed. Okay.
So here the elements of the research design. So we have to aim that what has to be done in our research. So accurate purpose statement has to be collected and techniques to be implemented for collecting and the analyzing research. The method applied for analyzing, collecting details and types of the research methodology, probable objection and research, settings for the research study and timeline, measurement of analysis. So these are the certain elements comes under the research design. So this is the same thing which we have discussed in the earlier point. Okay. So the main elements of the research design is depicted here for your better understanding. See, first, what is, you have to identify the area of interest. After the area of the interest, so what is, you must gather more information related to your interested area. From the gathered information, you have to identify the problem, and the problem means the what is left over and what is required to fill that gap. That has to be identified. So the purpose of the study has to be explored, described, and it must test to fit to the hypothesis testing. That is the purpose of the study. And the types of investigation is we have to choose the variables, and from the variables we have to interrelate their relationships and correlations and what are the difference and their rankings, everything, or the investigation strategy under the research design. And extent of the research interference is the minimal, that is studying events as they normally occur, the manipulation and control and the simulations. So what are the variables which is most and appropriate to the study, and what are the variables that are inconvenient to the other variables has to be removed. So these are the researchers interference. That means we have to fix the variables which is most related to the study. Next is study setting, that is contrived and non-contrived. Contrived and non-contrived, so that is a study setting. Next is the measurement and measures. It's operation definition, that is items, scaling, categorizing, coding. So certain variables comes under the items, that is demographic variables. Certain variables comes as a scaling. Some variables comes under the categorizing, and some variables considered as an coding. So we have seen the different types of variables, right? Independent and dependent, quantitative and qualitative, extraneous and intraneous, and control and contradictory variables. So these are the variables that you have come across. So you might have grasped the meaning of the each variables. So this has to be considered under the research design. And the unit and analysis of the population. So population is nothing but we are collect data collections, whether we are collecting the data through the interview or through the questionnaire or through from certain sources, through phone calls, like that. So there are the different types of collecting data. So under that, what we have chosen for our study has to be defined. Okay, and sampling design is an based on probability, or it may be a non-probability, that it talks about the sample size. So based on the population, and we will choose a sample size. So if your population is 100 and your sample may be a 25, okay, and we limit to the time horizon. It may be a one shot or longitudinal. During the short period, you may complete your research, or may your research have the more contradictory variables that may take time to complete to give the actual output to the study. Next one, data collection method. This will comes before the analysis. Okay. So that means that we have seen already the data collections may be conducted through questionnaire or the physical measurement through phone calls or interview. Like that, we will collect the data. So after collecting the data, we have to arrange it. I mean, in the statistical tools. Okay, so these about the research design. Okay. So far from this session, I believe that you have understood the concept of the research and how to identify the research problem and what are the variables and how the variables has to be identified in a different perception and how the same variable differs to the in each and every study and how research has to be designed for the research process. Okay. Is there any queries in this part? You may raise questions. Is there any queries? You have any queries related to this concept? Or you want to get some clarification under this concept? Okay, thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am. I now request Professor Divya to propose the vote of thanks.
Amala.
Good afternoon, all. Privileged to extend the vote of thanks on behalf of organizing committee of this faculty development program. I express my deepest gratitude to our esteemed resource person, Dr. S. Sivasakti. Ma'am, your insightful session have been a cornerstone of this program, enlightening us with practical examples and interactive approach, which truly enriched our understanding and empowered us to enhance our teaching professional practices. To my fellow participants, thank you for your active engagement, which added to the richness of this program. Once again, thank you all. Kindly fill the feedback form for today's session. I request all the participants to fill the feedback form for today's session. Feedback link will be posted in chat box. Thank you.